Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this lunchtime webinar. This session is designed to run for slightly less than an hour. So, well, actually far less than an hour. So don't worry, we're not going to take your entire lunch. We're also going to try to make it interactive. So if you'd like to ask questions, feel free to do so while we're running a session, and I'll make every effort to answer your questions as we go along. But if you don't see the answer, don't panic. I'll make sure I'll leave it towards the end of the Q&A section. If the answer is too long, I usually try to move it right towards the end. So the session today is going to be on rentvesting. We're going to discuss what rentvesting is. I explain how the strategy works and how perhaps you could take advantage of that. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't know your personal situation. So whatever we discuss today might not necessarily be the most ideal solution for your situation. So I just treat it maybe for educational purposes only at this stage. Let me first introduce the firm. So Apt Wealth Partners, we are a financial planning firm. We're a multi-award-winning firm. We have 3 offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Geelong, and we manage close to $2.7 billion worth of investments actively across 3,000 families. So we're running a lot of strategies simultaneously for large number of clients. Being a financial planning firm, we also own our own license. So we're not licensed by a bank or a large financial institution. We're not owned by anybody else. And that's a good thing, because that means we're not a shop front for pushing products onto clients. We are all about strategies. That's the core business. We live and breathe strategies for clients. And we can provide advice on various topics, from retirement planning, estate planning, superannuation, wealth protection, expats, US citizens, you name it, we'll probably do it. So it's not just property acquisition strategies. We do all kinds of other things as well. Quick introduction about myself. So I've been a financial planner for almost 17 years now. You will notice a bit of an accent today. That is a Polish accent. I've tried my whole life to get rid of it. It doesn't want to go away. So, but thanks to that, it allows me to also be active in the Polish community. So I do participate in SBS broadcasts as well. I am the financial consultant on the SBS Polish website, podcast. I'm also a property investor myself. So the strategies we're going to discuss today, I have used myself. I've seen the results that they can deliver and they can produce. And I help clients for the same strategy to achieve similar outcomes as well. So this is not a theory. This is also practice. Now, before we start, what I wanted to launch with is just to tell you just a short story of what I often notice, I suppose, through peers and for colleagues and for clients that come over to our office as well. It's a very common story which appears, and it seems to be probably more prominent in Sydney, because Sydney is on the extreme end of affordability crisis when it comes to housing. But don't think that this strategy does not apply to other locations as well. The reason why we're going to refer a few times to Sydney is because of the extremities that we see over here. But the same strategy can be just as well applied in other locations as well. Now, I want you for a moment to imagine a situation that, let's say we're looking at a young professional who's at the beginning of their career, or perhaps someone who's a little bit further down the track, someone who's getting ready to settle down. They want to buy their first home, perhaps the default setting has always been that you get your education, you get a job or start a business, You get a loan, you buy a house, you pay off the mortgage. When you finish with that, you start thinking about your retirement plan. Well, that's the way it used to be for many decades before that. And it seems like that this model is beginning to collapse. And we're going to cover that as well. So imagine at this point in time, you're getting ready to buy something. So what's the first thing that hits your news feed? And it's very, very current in today's market. Um, Before you even start thinking about the idea, you get bombarded with these sort of headings. And right away, the negativity sets in, even before you get a chance to start. So, just imagine that that person I just mentioned at the start. Imagine that you said, okay, well, let's go and look around the area that I live, or the area where my friends live, where my lifestyle is, and let's see what the market is like in this area. And this is generally when a lot of people arrive at a shock number one, I call that. Um, that's when you start realizing that you might have underestimated what is going to cost to actually buy into the area where you enjoy spending your time. And that's a very natural thing. I mean, even for persons who look at who actively watch realestate.com and look at the property prices in the area, even if you see the prices that the properties have sold for, this is always in the past. It is not what you're gonna have to pay to get into the same area. But let's just say that you being this young professional say, okay, I realize I might have slightly underestimated the prices. The next thing that you might do, you say, okay, well, let's go and talk to the mortgage broker and let's see how much I can actually borrow. And sometimes, unfortunately, this is where you can arrive at a shock number two. It's your borrowing capacity. So I've listed a couple of examples here right now, just more or less, this is roughly where you would be if you're in a situation where a single borrower on a different level of salary, that's where your borrowing capacity will be. Someone on 150K, that's about $800,000. Someone on 200K, which one might say is a very good salary, borrowing capacity is about just over 1 million. And if you're a couple, but with no dependents, combined income to 50K, your borrowing capacity is 1.36 million. Now, that borrowing capacity will vary slightly up and down depending on your specific situation. A savvy mortgage broker will actually ask you a lot of questions to figure out which lender will be most generous for your situation. That is why it's so crucial to speak to a broker instead of going direct to the bank, because the broker can compare hundreds of lenders and actually work out who is the best match for what you're looking for and what is your current situation. Now, you might say, but hang on, my friends who are in a similar situation or maybe on that income that is shown here were able to borrow far more than that. And I might say, well, you might be right. The issue is that was a year ago. The trouble is that since we had 13 consecutive interest rate rises, unfortunately, the borrowing capacity has been reduced by about 30% for majority of applicants. So just to put things in perspective, if you were able to borrow $1 million a year ago, now you'd be looking at about $700,000. So this is, I suppose, the moment when you start realizing that there's a significant gap, perhaps, between what you can actually borrow and how much you need to buy in the area where you would like to live. This is the point in time where a lot of people start compromising. So this young professional who was thinking about, well, let's buy it in that area that I like to spend my time, and the borrowing capacity is not there. Then you start thinking, okay, well, what if you move further away? What if you go to a different suburb? What if you decide, well, I'm going to travel a little bit longer? What if you start lowering your standards? Maybe you don't want to have such a nice place. Maybe you want to have a smaller place. So you start, running to open homes. You perhaps attend an auction or two, And unfortunately, this is when sometimes you arrive at a shock number three. And some of you might have been in the situation and might have experienced it personally. I have certainly seen that plenty of times. Um, you think that you know roughly what this place will sell for. You see the price guide, you arrive there, only to find out the price guide was there just to get you to the door. It's got nothing to do with the value of the property, how much it is going to sell for. So that can be a significant shock sometimes. So let's just for a moment rewind back and let's go back to the place where you're living and you'd like to move into. Let's take a look at the actual cost. Now, here I'm going to run two examples. They're both in Sydney, but as I said earlier, I'm using Sydney examples because Sydney is more on the extreme ends of the affordability problem. And that's just an average price guide for two most popular properties in those suburbs. And I picked the suburbs which are most popular with these types of properties at the moment. We have Redfern apartment, average price 1.1 mil, and 4-bedroom house in Forestville, average price about 2.3 mil. So if your borrowing capacity is $800,000 and you want to buy in Redfern, then you're going to need a deposit of about $350,000, that including stamp duty. If you want to buy a house in Forestville, you're a couple, you have a borrowing capacity of 1.36 or 1.4 million, and you want to buy a house, you have to bring $1 million to the table. I'm just going to let that sink in for a while. Now, the question is, how long do you think it would take you to save from the deposit? How many people do you know who have $1 million lying around in their bank account? How long would it take to save $1 million? And I can tell you right now, if it's going to take you 10 years to save it, which is at a rate of about $100,000 per year, by the time you get there, the price of the property will be probably double, and you have to start again. And this is the frustrating point. And I suppose that's the point where a lot of people, once they realize that situation, that's when those feelings of helplessness and frustration set in. And I can tell you personally, I've spoken to so many people who have literally given up on the idea of buying their own place because of that very issue. The borrowing capacity versus deposit versus purchase price, it just doesn't add up, and the realize might not be achievable. But this is not the reason why we're here. The reason why we're here because when I ask ourselves a question, is there another way out of the problem? So let's take a closer look at this situation. I just want to zoom in on those two suburbs a little bit more. So that apartment in Redfern, the $1.1 million apartment, it will rent for $800 per week. That's the average rent. And the same house that we discussed earlier, that rents for about $1,265 per week as an average cost. So you can actually rent in Redfern for 3.8% of the value of the apartment, or you can rent in Forestville for 2.9% of the house value. In the meantime, the interest rate on the mortgage itself will be roughly around 6.5%, not to mention the principal repayments and other costs on top of that. So just keep that in mind. Take a note for a moment about those rental prices and the percentage of the price of the apartment that it costs. I'm going to now go even deeper into the numbers and just run a comparison, cash flow comparison between two situations. Looking at Redfern, first example. On your left, you have a cost of living in the place for the renter. That's simple, $800 per week times 52 weeks, annual rent, $41,600. On the right is a cost for the homeowner. So annual mortgage repayments, roughly about $61,000. And that assumes that you have paid $350,000 deposit. Then you have strata fees, council rates, and so on. By the time you finish with all these, we have an annual cost of $66,000, give or take. So the cash flow difference between those two persons living in exactly the same place is about $24,000 per annum. Now, it gets even worse if you're considering a homeowner who placed only a 10% deposit, which is $110,000 plus 50K stamp duty. That difference in cash flow is over 40,000. So it's the owner pays double of what the renter pays to live in exactly the same place. Okay. And that's just the apartments. Now, that example gets even more extreme if we zoom into the house. So remember the forest bill, I mentioned you could rent it for $12.65 per week. So again, on the left, the cost for the renter to live in the house or for a family, or doesn't matter how many people live in there, the overall cost for the household is about $65,780 per year. Remember, the owner pays for all the repairs, they pay the strata, they pay water bills. Well, that depends on the arrangement, but they pay the council rates, they pay everything else. You just pay rent. So the cost to the homeowner, the annual mortgage in itself is about $140,000 per year in repayments. And that assumes a 20% deposit plus stamp duty, which is about $570,000. So I'm running a situation of somebody who's got slightly lower deposit than 1 million. I'll list the council rates in there, but I'm not even going into the effort of listing any additional fees or costs or repair costs or maintenance costs in there, because in comparison to the mortgage, they're pretty much insignificant. The cost to the owner is about $142,000, give or take, per year. And look at the cash flow difference, because this is the most important part in the comparison. Cash flow difference around $77,000 per year for those two persons living in exactly the same house. Huge difference. Now you might ask yourself a question, why is it such a large difference? Well, if you go back to those numbers a couple of slides ago, the main reason is that the rent is such a small percentage of the value of the property, and the smaller that we call it a rental yield, and the smaller the rental yield is, the bigger the difference of cost between the renter and the owner. This is the rule you gotta remember. So now that we know that, what if I told you that you could use your deposit to perhaps buy a property that rents out for a 4 or 5% yield, or maybe even more? And that is possible. I'm not saying it's going to be Sydney, but that is definitely possible. What if the spare cash flow in that situation I just displayed to you was used to assist with paying off the debt on those properties and also growing in value at the same time? And what if the tax office was so nice that they helped you to claim some of the cash flow as an expense against your other income? This is a very popular topic right now. It's called negative gearing. What if the tax firm was helping you with that as well? And what if you could use some of your leftover funds and the tax deductions to buy even more investments, such as shares and other properties? Do you see how the scenario is beginning to change? Could that idea work? Well, let me show you why. First of all, and every mortgage broker will probably tell you that as well, the banks are willing to lend more to investors because they can factor rental income as a boost to borrowing capacity. As unfortunate as that sounds, but that is the fact. Once you start renting a property, your income goes up, therefore your affordability rises at the same time. It's just pure maths. The higher the rental yield that you earn, the less strain you presses on your cash flow. Because if you can rent your property for 5 or 6% yield, and your mortgage repayments are charging you an interest of 6.5%, well, the difference gets smaller and smaller the higher the rental yield. Now, so even if your interest rate is higher than the net rental income you receive, you claim the difference against your other income. This is the negative gearing I mentioned just a second ago. And the higher your marginal tax rate, the lower is your real cost of holding the property, because you get a large deduction on that income. So in most situations, what I find running the strategies for clients is that the tenants and the taxman will fund most of your repayments on those loans. Now, and in the meantime, while you're doing that, you're managing to purchase significant assets that will accelerate your own wealth growth over time, while you're still able to live in the area you want to live. This is what we call rentvesting. So I hope that explains at least roughly what rentvesting strategy is about. But why is it so effective? If there's anything you're going to remember out of this webinar, it's this: lending is key. Lending is what gives you access to leverage, and leverage is what enhances your returns. This is how you accelerate building wealth. I'm going to run a very simple example on that, because I just want to show the maths of how that works. Simple example: $50,000 deposit. You borrow $450,000 to buy an asset which is worth $500,000. So 50,000 is yours, 450 came from the bank. Let's say this asset grows in value by 10%. Doesn't matter if it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, it's irrelevant. It grows by 10%. It's now worth 550. So you've actually made a gain of $50,000 on that investment. So you put 50,000 of your own money, and you just made a gain of 50,000 on investment. You doubled your return. You doubled your money on that. Where else can you do that? Leverage enhances your wealth building. This is why it's such a powerful tool. Now, what else would that strategy achieve? Well, if you're still set on buying a home where you want to live, that rentvesting strategy is one way that you can supercharge your way to reach that deposit goal. Remember how we said, we posed the question, how long will it take you to save the deposit? If it takes you 10 years, you're never going to get there. But if you're buying assets, you're leveraging into assets which grow in value themselves, you could achieve the goal. That achieving the goal becomes far more realistic. And I have seen that happening. We've run strategies like this for clients when they came out of it with a huge deposits that allowed them to buy property because they were able to get a much smaller loan for what they wanted to live. It's about achieving your dream. Now, if you don't intend to buy and are just content with renting, that's fine as well. But at least this strategy sets yourself as a great base to start building wealth and putting your savings to work. So it's one way of starting on a journey where at least you're putting your spare cash flow to work. And the most important part is you're no longer chasing a target that is moving away from you, because what you're doing is capturing smaller targets along the way that propel you faster to your future goal. And I speak to seasoned investors all the time, and every single one of them, it's amazing how many of them say that. Every single one of them tells me that I wish I started sooner, because if once you've seen the results, that's when people realize that every month you wait is the month you don't get back, and it delays you on you achieving your financial goals. You're doing something constructive with your money. Now, let me just show briefly how does Apt fit into the picture as well. I'm going to explain first what we do, and then I'm going to run a couple of case studies as well, so you can actually see the real situations. So our role is to help you build a comprehensive plan to succeed. And usually where we start measuring your cash flow, and we run different scenarios to determine an optimal lending strategy. Again, every seasoned investor will tell you that buying property portfolios, it's a game of finance. So you want to get it right, so you don't run off borrowing capacity too fast. So we design optimal lending strategy, and we also stress test your cash flow so you can build buffer zones. Very important. You don't want to be in a situation where you borrow yourself up to maximum limits and they have no spare cash left, because all it takes is the interest rates go up again. I'm not saying they will, but they might. Or there's unexpected costs and you're on a shaky ground at that point in time. Second thing that we do, we always design a fallback plan. And that's specifically designed for health issues. We look at things like income protection cover at the very least, because that strategy depends primarily on you being able to continue earning your income. If your income stops, the strategy collapses, and we don't want that. It's not worth the risk. So we want to have something to fall back on. And usually most people are not in a luxurious situation where you have a large savings cushion you can fall back on and live off that for a couple of years. I mean, if you do, why not invest it? But income protection is probably the most cost-effective way of doing that. And obviously, well, you may or may not know that, but it's also tax deductible for you as well. So it's something we look at as a fallback plan. Now, we also help you find a property. We're well connected with a good network of good buyers agents who will help you find the property. And we design an investment portfolio made of both real estate and liquid investments. Now, what do I mean by liquid investments? Liquid investment is something that you can liquidate within a couple of days and have the money back. Very important. Whenever you're running a real estate portfolio, doesn't matter the size, but the bigger the size, the higher the probability. Sooner or later, you're gonna find yourself, you get a call from your agent who says, "Look, there's a problem in the property. We might have a leaking roof, or the tenant might have done some damages. We need to fix it right away, and we're getting quotes. It might cost 20, 30 grand. Where is the money going to come from?" And liquid investments allows you to liquidate it within 3 days, have the money in your bank account, problem solved. There's no break. The break in receiving rent for a place is short, and you don't causing an issue for the tenant as well. So our objective is to keep you liquid at all times. So we build share portfolios, we use other fixed interest investments. We do a whole kinds of mix of investments that are required to do that. We have got a whole investment team in Apt who does nothing all day but look at the market all day and decide what's the best thing to allocate your funds to. Now, another important point in our strategy is we need to optimize the portfolio for tax as well. So a lot of people I find who buy properties, not only this is the only thing they buy, they don't have any investments, but they also don't consider tax. You got to think several years ahead of what the situation is going to be. So for example, if you're planning a maternity leave down the track, or if you're expecting to receive an increase in income, whatever it is that you're planning for, we need to know that now, ideally, so we can make the ownership structure as flexible as possible to fit the situation, so you don't end up paying more tax than you have to. And a very, very important part of any strategy is the exit plan. I find that's the issue across majority of property investors or any kind of investors. They often don't have an exit strategy. It's very crucial, because if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to know if you're off the track? If we know what the goal is and whether the goal involves selling properties or extracting equity out of it, whatever it is that we're doing with it, we need to know the exit strategy because that will dictate how we structure it so you pay as little tax as possible. And we have various strategies for minimizing tax when it comes to sale of properties. At the same time, I might just run a quick analogy between the share market and property portfolio. When it comes to shares, we don't just go and buy shares for clients and we sit on it and we don't do anything with it. Now, every share has got its objective. Once it reaches the price we want it to reach, we look at it and we assess whether we should exit it or whether we should continue holding on to that. Investors should be applying the same strategy to real estate as well. Once it reaches objective, there is no benefit in holding it for forever. I see it all the time. A lot of investors, they buy a property and they sit in it for 20 or 30 years. I mean, nothing wrong with that if this is your retirement plan. But are you getting the most optimal growth out of your portfolio? Wouldn't you rather be rotating between properties that grow in value at a faster rate than just an average rate? So again, that's part of the plan. And finally, we monitor your wealth creation and plan every next move with you so you can reach your goals. And I know how important it is because it's a lot easier to take action if you know there's someone guiding you along the way. We want to make investing easy for our clients. We value relationships more than transactions. So yes, some clients, we might just do a transaction only where we just develop a plan of action for the next year and that's it because we know that that's all they can do. That's fine. But then for investors who have ambitious goals to build portfolios over time, we run with you, we go with you along on the journey. So you're not there by yourself. As I said, want to be a wealth partner. I help you succeed. Now, let's run some practical case studies. So I'm going to talk to you about the situation, which is a very common situation. Well, look, very, very popular situation to begin with. A couple who are looking to buy their first home. This is John and Tom. This first case study will have lots of numbers running in it, but I promise you, if you're not a numbers person, the second case study will have very little in terms of numbers because I know not everybody likes to look at the figures. So we run two situations. So Jaya and Tom, mid-30s, they've done very well with saving a healthy deposit, about $200,000, which was nice. I think that I don't see a lot of people who are able to do that, so they were very good savers. The issue was that they had a borrowing power of $1.68 million at the time, but that wouldn't quite see them into the house that met their needs in their desired area. So yes, they could have slightly compromised and borrow up to the maximum, but I didn't feel comfortable with committing to such a large loan and potential financial stress. And we knew that if they went ahead and did that loan and did that purchase, their cash flow surplus would fall to only $20,000 per annum, which was a very large risk because it gives you a very small buffer. And if interest rates were to rise, which unfortunately they did quite significantly, if they went ahead with that decision, we know now they would have lost the house. They would not be able to meet the repayments, unfortunately. So that would have ended very badly for them. But they were obviously aware of that this is a high risk, so they didn't want to do it, and they had a chat with us, and we designed an alternative plan. So what we did is we initially went and used the savings as a deposit for 2 investment properties. So we spent about $141,000 on that. We also purchased a $50,000 share portfolio. We built a share portfolio for them. We got them into loans which were roughly about 560, let's say. And we managed to find properties which were renting for very high yield, and the annual cash flow falling by only about $5,700 per year. So they were still saving 61 grand per year. So still a very healthy situation, but already they're locked in with 2 great assets which are going to grow in value. So, and in the meantime, they continue to rent in the area they enjoy living, what their friendships are and all that. So after 1 year of doing this, they were able to save for the next deposit. So we purchased one more property. So that was number 3. This is the time when interest rates started rising as well, but so too did the rental income. Of course, the rental income was rising as fast as the interest rates, but still, the surplus cash flow dropped by another 7,200. So the annual surplus was about 53,750, but still reasonably healthy. So they were not feeling the pressure. They were not under such a stress as they would have been with the regular home loan. The results, after 3 years, well, they initially started with $200,000 in cash. 2 years on, so 2 years, well, 2.5, I should say now, because I've done the case to be done that. 2 years on, they have $606,000 in investable assets net of all the loans. And so that equals a wealth improvement of $406,105. This is because the value of the properties has grown, and so did their shares as well. Now, despite the fact that the interest rates were rising and they also experienced a 25% increase in their own rent, they continue to have a surplus of $40,000. And the reason why is because we stressed the cash flow before we committed to any strategy. So we knew that this would cause a problem. So we don't want to leave a client in a situation where they're stressing whether they're going to be able to make the next monthly payment. So they have done extremely well on those properties. They have tripled their wealth because we use leverage. And now they're in a situation, they have complete flexibility what to do next. And this is the best part of it, because we're arriving at a point where they don't have a choice. They can sell their assets and continue searching for a home. But the key difference is they're going to have a much larger deposit available, which means a lot lower loan, or they can continue investing. We have potential to do more. There is sufficient borrowing capacity left for them to buy one more property, or we can double the share portfolio by depositing more cash into it. So it opened up the options for the couple. It's I really like their story. It shows exactly what the Rentvesting strategy can do. Now, I promised I'll also run a strategy of somebody without the numbers. So I'll do that next. So this strategy, we're going to focus on explaining conceptually how it benefits a person, how it gives them options out of their situation. So this is Jason. Now, here we have a situation where someone who's a little bit older than that. So mid-40s, earning a very good income, but working very long hours. Jason, he had a very large mortgage. He owned an apartment, a nice apartment, I have to say, upmarket location. It was a very large mortgage. 1/3 has been paid off already, so he's done well. But the trouble is that he didn't want to see his future continuing at the same pace for 20 years. His worry was that he's going to end up spending his entire working life paying off large mortgages and then retiring late. And this is precisely why we started talking on investing, because if you're investing, it means that you want a different outcome in your life. So we sat down with Jason, and the first task we worked out what are the priorities here. So we looked at the zoning strategy. We looked at the wealth protection as well. As I mentioned to you a couple of slides ago, it was very important with a fallback plan. Jason didn't even have income protection strategy, so insurance. So if he wouldn't be able to work, he was at risk of losing his own house. So we had to get it done very quickly. And because Jason was earning good income, we had to look at tax optimization as well for him. And of course, an exit strategy. So let me just go through it in a bit more detail. So with Jason, what we did, we've accessed equity in the existing property to produce a deposit for 2 investment properties. Now, in terms of how that's done, if you own a property and the mortgage is nowhere near as high as what the property is worth, you can actually access a portion of the difference as a loan. And we call it commonly equity loan. And any mortgage broker will be able to show you how you can do that. And we use that as a deposit for another property. And obviously we've got additional loans to buy those properties. We also use some of his existing savings. He had roughly about $100,000 worth of savings to start a share portfolio as well. So we managed to instantly raise his investments from the plain $100,000 worth of cash in the bank into a $1 million investment property portfolio and a $70,000 share portfolio instantly. Now, remember the example I mentioned a couple of slides ago about leverage. If an asset grows by 10%, you remember how I showed you can double your funds? And that was just with a $500,000 portfolio. So imagine if you have a $1 million portfolio, how much you can double, how much you can increase your equity with a large asset. Now, why do we choose that approach? Well, unlocking equity allowed him to buy a very large real estate portfolio and hasn't used up his cash for deposit. We then use this growth in those properties to help him pay off his mortgage or gradually supplement his income. Depends on the choice will be. Jason hasn't decided on it yet. We might end up selling the property and paying off the loan, or we might just sell one of them and supplement his income with lower loan repayments. Regardless of what he's going to do, he now has flexibility. At the same time, he also has significant tax deductions because both properties are negatively geared. He's in the top margin tax bracket. He's getting significant tax deductions. Now, the growth achieved on the two investment properties is already equal to half of the outstanding mortgage he had on his existing apartment. So we already moved so far ahead of him. Now, strategically, like I said before, we're going to time the sale of those assets in the future to minimize his capital gains tax as well. But if Jason decides he wants to continue investing, we'll have the option of continue to access further equity from the new properties to use it as a deposit for the next purchase. So we have a lot of flexibility how we're going to play that. This is why it's so important to have somebody who goes along with you as an investment partner, and you have a consultant who lays out different options, gives you a rough result, what they're going to achieve, and together you can make decisions. It's a lot easier that way, trust me. Investment strategies like these allow you to start taking charge of your own destiny. And the idea of getting a professional investment advice is an investment in self. We create strategies to match the client's circumstances. This is not a cookie cutter solution. All right. So I promise you that I'm not going to take your entire lunch break. I think I fulfilled the promise. So if you'd like to hear more about that, feel free to contact me. We run this webinar every couple of months. So if you want to hear again, not a problem. But if you want to start any action, I suggest let's make an appointment. Let's look at your situation. Now, we're going to run a bit of a special as well. We normally charge for consultation $220,000. It's an hour consultation. But if you mention that you've seen this webinar, we'll load it at our cost. So we can meet with you for an hour. We can discuss what options are possible, what's not possible in a situation. And sometimes we might arrive at a point where we say, look, you need to save that much, or you need to do this and that before we can start. Sometimes we can launch right away. So I'll be able to answer the question for you. I can say how realistic it is as well. All right. So if we don't have any further questions, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.